this whole nuclear peace deal, it wasn't really about Iran creating nuclear weapons to, destroy the United States. It was more about getting into the central bank, getting into the oil, putting the dollar on their oil, and they needed a way to make everyone feel comfortable and make everyone feel like, okay, look what we're doing here. We're going to remove the threat. Once we remove the threat, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, there was never a threat from Iran. This was all propaganda from the beginning.
Our top tech company of 2016 is on track to earning millions of dollars in royalties as they're revolutionizing the $120 billion battery industry, a potential lottery ticket in a truly game-changing technological revolution. Headed up by Paul Matizik, whose track record is delivering 1,500% to 4,000% gains to investors with his last 3 companies. Learn more at crushthestreet.com/tech2016.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I got a returning guest today, and we're going to have a discussion, get an update on the global economic and geopolitical unrest. And his name is Dave. He's with X22 Report, and he spends his time educating and uncovering truth for people. So, Dave, thanks so much for coming on the show with me today.
Ken, thank you very much for having me on.
Dave, I wanted to get someone on, and I couldn't think of a better person to do this with, to get your thoughts on what has happened in Brussels with the attacks. Is this a false flag? Is this an ongoing pattern that we are seeing with these terrorist attacks? And, what are your expectations with what happened in Belgium, and what do you expect to result from it?
Well, I think the Brussels attack is just the beginning. And we can see from the past that there's been a lot of false flags. It's not just this one. But if we go back in time a little bit, we can see that this kind of revolves around what is happening in Syria, with Russia, with the Islamic State. And we can see at this point, and if you've been following what's been happening in Syria, Syria right now, the Syrian armed forces, the Russian armed forces, they have been liberating towns and villages and pushing the Islamic State out. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the Islamic State is more like the proxy army for the U.S. government and the coalition forces, where they use this terrorist group, which they created, to fight inside of Syria, and it's being used to remove Assad. Now, all the stories that we hear that the U.S. is bombing the Islamic State, they're going after the Islamic State, well, it's all false, because during the 18 months that the U.S. was bombing inside Syria, the Islamic State expanded their territory, and they took over most of the eastern part of Syria, and were moving towards the western area. And we can see at this point, since Russia stepped in and was helping Assad, the Islamic State has been losing ground. And this is a problem for the United States government and the coalition forces. So what we're seeing at this point is Turkey, who takes its orders from the U.S. government, is trying to continue this battle inside of Syria, and they want Assad removed. That's their whole entire goal. Their goal is to remove Assad, set up a central bank, install the pipeline, put the natural resources on the U.S. dollar to keep the entire system propped up, and eventually go into Iran. Because this was their plan back in 2008. They're way behind schedule. And this false flag that we saw in Belgium is one part of them trying to convince the world that the Islamic State still has strength, that they're still a threat, because Turkey tried many different false flags inside the country, and what they needed to do was create fear that the Islamic State is out there and they're trying to get more forces into Syria, which makes no sense. And it made no sense since the beginning. Why would the Islamic State go out and bomb different areas and say, hey, United States, come on in and bomb us. Hey, UK, come on in and bomb us. Hey, Russia, come on in and bomb us. It makes no sense whatsoever. Why would anyone do this if you're trying to take over a country like this terrorist organization, which we know is not real? But the whole story makes no sense. Now, what happened in Belgium, we're starting to see that a lot of the information coming out of there is not exactly right. Yes, there were bombs, but what it looks like is that these bombs were very, very powerful. The individuals that blew themselves up, they were dancing at nightclubs before this. They were drinking. They were doing everything that normally a Muslim would not do. And we see this as a repeating story where afterwards these people are partying, these people are having fun, and we can see at this point in time that most of them are patsies. Now, the explosion was so strong inside the terminals that it blew out windows, and wrapping yourself in explosives, it wouldn't create this gigantic type of explosion. And there must have been bombs planted in other areas inside of the terminal. And we can see at this point, their whole push right now is to create fear, to enact more draconian laws, and to take freedoms and the rights of people and remove them so they can spy on more people and try to bring the European nations together to go and fight the Islamic State. And we know that the European nations, UK, we know Greece and Spain and many of the other countries, they might want to exit the European Union because of all these refugees. The debt is unsustainable, and we're seeing them close borders. And it looks like this was a propaganda piece to try to bring them together to fight one common foe instead of breaking apart and saying, you know what, we're going to go our own way. So we can see this is the beginning of the false flags, because as this entire economy starts to fall apart, they, and I say they, the U.S. government, the central bankers, the coalition forces, they need to blame this on another group or entity. They can't accept responsibility for the economy falling apart. And we can see they're kind of stuck because Russia right now is in Syria. The proxy army, the Islamic State, is all but gone at this point. And Syria and Russia have done this on their own in about, 5 to 6 months, where the United States and the coalition forces that spent billions and billions of dollars and dropped thousands of bombs couldn't do in 18 months because they really weren't going after the Islamic State. Mm-hmm. They were destroying their own proxy army. And we see right now the U.S. is backed in a corner. They're trying all different ways to get something going here. And they're trying to make Erdogan right now look like the bad guy, the dictator. Well, he is a dictator. But they're trying to make him the poster child, and everything revolve around this. And this is why we saw the emergency travel warnings, not just from the U.S., but from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, saying, you might want to get out of Turkey right now because we don't know, something might happen here. And we see this is all in the southern part of Turkey, which is the northern part of Syria. And we see that something is about to happen, and most likely we'll see more false flags as we go throughout this year.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of patterns, and it's accelerating as we go along, and you bring up very compelling points with that. But yeah, excellent analysis there, Dave. Dave, I haven't had anyone on the show yet to really break down the Iran nuclear deal. And I know you're very researched on this, and we're hearing from the right how bad this deal is. And I want to get it from you. Is this deal as bad as we're hearing, or is it worse? Or what are your thoughts on the Iran nuclear deal and how it ties in to what we're talking about?
Well, as we know, since the overthrow back in the 70s, the U.S. lost control of Iran. They didn't have a puppet government in there. And since that time period up until now, they've been trying to get back into Iran somehow, some way. And none of the plans have actually worked. And they've had sanctions on Iran for quite a while, just like Cuba. And we see at this point that this whole nuclear peace deal was not really about nuclear weapons. It wasn't really about Iran creating nuclear weapons to, destroy the United States. It was more about getting into the central bank, getting into the oil, putting the dollar on their oil, and they needed a way to make everyone feel comfortable and make everyone feel like, okay, look what we're doing here. We're going to remove the threat. Once we remove the threat, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, there was never a threat from Iran. This was all propaganda from the beginning. They've never invaded any country within, 200 years or so? Yes, they were in war. Other countries were invading them or trying to fight them, and they had to respond. But they didn't initiate anything, I think, in the last 200 years whatsoever, compared to the United States, where we invaded how many countries at this point? Yeah. Many. How many governments have we overthrown? Many. And we can see right now that Iran already came out and said, listen, we're not even going to use the dollar to pay for the oil. We're going to be using the euro, and we'll probably use this temporarily and then move to a different currency. And the U.S. does not like this at all. This was part of their plan going way back, where they wanted to get in there, just like every other country, and put the entire country on the dollar when they sell the oil. So the nuclear deal was a deal that was made, which is a cover story to make everyone feel comfortable about what is happening in Iran. But behind the scenes, was really to have them use the dollar. And already Iran says they're not going to use it. And there are a lot of neocons in there that still want to overthrow Iran. And it looks like they're going to have to do it at this point because they're not agreeing to the terms that they want, where they want the dollar on the oil. And this is why we see, look, they violated the nuclear deal by having missiles, by creating ballistic missiles that could carry nuclear warheads. None of this is part of the nuclear deal whatsoever. Yes, they can continually bring it up, but if you actually read the nuclear deal and what they've done, this is not part of it at all. Russia continually comes out and cites different sections of the nuclear deal and says this is not part of it whatsoever. But they're using it as propaganda in the corporate media. The government's using it. And this is all because, in the end, they need to get into Syria. They need to get into Iran. They need to go back into Libya. They need to go back into Lebanon, Yemen, and reinstate the puppet governments there and keep the dollar on the oil reserves. Because once this stops and once the dollar comes off the oil reserves, and these countries use other currencies to pay, allow other countries to use different currencies to pay for the oil, the petrodollar system goes down the tubes. Other countries don't have to keep the dollar in reserves. Those dollars come floating back to the United States, and we have a devaluation of the dollar where we see hyperinflation and everything starts collapsing. So the United States government central bankers, they're in a bind right now. Their system is coming to an end. The debt is unsustainable. And it's just a matter of time before the whole thing just falls apart.
Gallup did a poll recently, and it showed that people feel that the American government is the biggest problem in their own life. And this is increasingly becoming an issue in the U.S. and around the world. And I'm wondering, is rejection of conventional wisdom going mainstream in your opinion?
I think things are changing. I think slowly but surely people are starting to wake up, especially as the economy continually deteriorates. I mean, a lot of people around the country are starting to realize the economy is not as good as it is. The government is overstepping its bounds, and they're pushing a lot of laws and restrictions on the people. And this is not what America was supposed to be. And I think a lot of people are starting to wake up now, and especially when people start losing jobs and they start researching things and saying, okay, the government's telling me that unemployment's at 4.9%. I just got a pink slip. I'm unemployed. I'm looking for a job. I'm sending my resume out there. No one's responding. Some of the resumes that I send out, I get a response, but the salary is much, much lower, and something doesn't make sense here. And then they go off and they research and they say, okay, there's something wrong here. Let me take a look. Yes, I'm starting to see the alternative media. I'm starting to see what is really going on here. And this has become a trend. More and more people are waking up. More and more people are saying, okay, the government is definitely the problem. And the government is afraid of this. They know eventually the majority of the people, they will eventually wake up, because as things get worse and worse and worse, they will wake up and say, okay, the blame is the government. The blame is, actually, I think the blame goes past that. It's the central bank. But they are responsible for everything that's been happening here. And of course, that will trickle down into the banks, into Wall Street, and then they'll put everything together and say, okay, we know what the problem is at this point. And this is their biggest fear. So I do think people are starting to wake up. I think a lot more people are looking at alternative media. They're going away from the corporate media. They're not really listening to the government, because as I speak to more and more people, actually as people write into me, they tell me their situation. At one point, everything was fine. They lost their job, and they can't find anything. So they have maybe one or two, maybe even three part-time jobs just to try to make what they were making before, and they say it's very difficult. They woke up, they wanted to know what was going on, why they couldn't find these jobs, and they started searching on the net, and they found, myself, they found SGT Report, they found UCAN, they found many other people out there, and they're starting to realize that something else is going on here, and I need to figure this out. And we can see already, even with people looking at Trump, that not that I care about Republican or Democrat. I just want someone in there that's going to support the people and not corporations, central banks, or foreign governments. But you can see just from what everyone is doing today, they're speaking out and saying, okay, we're tired of the politicians. We're tired of all the lies. We're tired of everything. And if it wasn't Trump and it was someone else, I don't think it would matter. I think people are saying, you know what, we're going to vote away from the everyday politician today because we're just sick and tired of it already. And we just want someone else in there that's not part of the status quo right now.
Dave, do you think Trump, talking about Trump and what we were talking about earlier with ISIS being the proxy army for the central banks, do you think Trump, if he wins, will go and be outside of the central bank agenda and actually go after ISIS in the way he talks about doing?
If Trump is elected, if he makes it that far, I don't know how many days he's actually going to spend in the White House before they take him out. That's my biggest fear. Anyone that is not part of the political establishment, part of the good old boy network up in Washington, and who bows to the central bank and to the neocons, I don't know how long they'll last there. I think he will initially try. I think he'll try to make things right. But once he starts, we can see through past history, there are other forces that are out there. And everyone has to remember, the president really doesn't run the country. The president and Washington is controlled by the central banking system. And we can see from our Congress, from the government officials, that they're not interested in the people. They're not working for the people. They're not looking at legislation. They're doing things to support themselves. So when Trump gets there, I think he'll have good intentions. I think he'll look at every single bill and everything that's coming across his desk and say, okay, why is this for you? This is no good, because he's a businessman. And he's going to look at this as a contract and say, okay, why are these senators, why are these congressmen getting pieces of this? Why are these are connected to their friends? And a lot of the bills and legislation that pass through are going to be like, okay, I can't sign these. These are no good. And he's going to hit roadblocks right in the beginning. And people are not going to take too kindly to him. And I think eventually what they're going to do, just like they did with Kennedy, what they did with Lincoln, what they tried with Andrew Jackson, the other two presidents, Lincoln and Kennedy, were assassinated. Andrew Jackson, when he got rid of the central bank, they attempted to assassinate him. So I think the pattern will follow, and I don't know how long he'll last in there to get anything of value done. But again, we'll have to wait and see.
Dave, so I want to get your thoughts on the economy. The political banner, the stock market, has been going up in the most recent weeks. It doesn't look like what we were seeing in January. And it's looking better for central banks and government, because when the stock market goes up, taxes go up, and things kind of get eased in the minds of people, and people continue to just live in their normalcy bias, at least the ones that still have their jobs and can go to the grocery store and live a normal life. But are you buying it? And, what's your current assessment here with what we're seeing in March 2016?
Well, I mean, we started off the year, but we actually ended the 2015 year as the market not doing so well. As soon as January hit, everything started to fall apart. And at this point, the market really is not any type of indicator of how the real economy is doing. Actually, it's an indicator, the last indicator to tell us that everything is just falling apart. So if I just look at the stock market, I would say, oh yeah, look, everything is doing fantastically here in the U.S., around the world, and there's nothing to worry about. But then if you remove the market and you look at the economic indicators and you look at the amount of layoffs and you look at retail, you look at GDP, you look at manufacturing, you look at the service sectors, well, they tell a completely different story, which makes no sense. And remember, the market is very easy to manipulate. The Federal Reserve, at one point, well, actually it's still doing it, is purchasing the toxic real estate from banks. They're giving them the free money, and these banks take the funds that they get from the Fed and they put it into the stock market to boost the market up. A lot of corporations today are buying back their own stocks. Even though profits, sales, revenue are going down, they're buying back their stocks to pump up the market. The stock market has the high-frequency traders, the plunge protection team, which they have the ability to manipulate the market where the Fed gives free money, and they go in and they purchase stocks to pump it back up. So if I just look at that, it seems like everything's fine. But on the other hand, when you look at what's really happening in the U.S., like unemployment, I mean, we have 94.3 million people out of work. The U.S. is telling us, the BLS is telling us that 8.2 million is the official number of people not working in the U.S. And if you add the 94.3 million that have fallen off the market, and you take the official number of 8.2 million who are out of work that they tell us, we have about 102 million people out of work. Well, that doesn't sound good. we see retail contracting. More stores are closing in the last 2 years than any time before that. And from the retail closing down, more and more people are losing their jobs. Now, remember, these people in stores are part-time workers, and it's very interesting how they gauge the unemployment numbers. If they're in retail and they're working part-time and they're not working a certain number of hours and receiving a certain number of pay, when they get laid off, guess what? They're not counted. Mm-hmm. But if someone gets a part-time job, they're counted as a full-time job, which makes no sense whatsoever. So that's a little bit of a manipulated type of scenario where things might look better than they really are, but in a recovering, prosperous economy, we see things expand. We're seeing retail contract quite a bit. During the holiday season, we've seen stores like Barnes & Noble's, Aeropostale, Best Buy, Macy's, all reporting they're closing stores. Why? If the economy's doing so well, you'd be expanding. Well, everyone says, well, it's online sales. Well, the online sales do not support everyone going from the brick-and-mortar stores over and purchasing at online sales, because you would see that jump dramatically. Guess what? It hasn't. We're seeing every time they tell us that unemployment is getting lower and lower, we see more and more layoffs. IBM's laying off 1,000 people. Boeing laying off 4,500. We see State Street Corp going to be laying off 7,000 people. And we have been seeing thousands upon thousands of people being laid off all the time. And as time goes on, it's getting worse. We see rail traffic volumes. That is declining. Trucking is declining. The Baltic Dry Index has hit its lowest point ever. Yes, it's moved up a little bit over around, I think it's like 415 points or so, but still this 415-point number, which is the raw material that's used for manufacturing, is the lowest we've ever seen, going all the way back, I think, to 1985. So
Wow.
when we look at everything here, this is showing us a completely different picture. And by the way, the Atlanta Fed is already predicting right now that the first quarter GDP here in the U.S. is going to be something around 1% or so. And remember, this is also manipulated, because what they do is they throw in Obamacare, and every time you hear, wow, consumer spending, it's off the charts today. Well, Obamacare is included in consumer spending.
Wow.
So when you look at consumer spending, all that health insurance that everyone's paying for, all the premiums that are rising and everything like that, that's included. If you strip that away, consumer spending is in the negative range.
Wow.
So they manipulate this all different ways to make us think that everything is fine. So when we look at real economic indicators, everything that I just mentioned, we see a completely different story. Manufacturing is abysmal right now. It is continually declining for something like, 5, 6, 7 months in a row.
Right.
We've lost about 1.6 million jobs in manufacturing since 2008. Everything right now makes no sense, because what they're doing is they're keeping the illusion alive with the stock market. They want everyone looking over there. Don't look at anything like this. If we go back to 2008, it was exactly the same way. Everything was falling apart in the background, but everyone was looking at that 14,000 all-time high stock market rally that was happening in 2007, 2008, and everyone was still looking at that until the very end, when everything fell apart. But guess what? It just didn't fall apart. That was the last signal to let you know, yeah, we're in a recession, but everything was falling apart before that time period. We're seeing the same thing happen now. There is absolutely no difference. Well, there is a difference. This time it's much, much worse, because everything was created as one gigantic bubble, and these bubbles are going to pop, and it's going to come crashing down.
Dave, let's talk about Obamacare just for a minute here. You know, you brought it up, and I know it's a hot button topic for you, and it is for me. I mean, you know, deductibles are going through the roof. We got government mandatory insurance. You know, the penalty for not having insurance is sort of low right now, but I can only imagine this is going to continue to increase. I mean, what is the hidden agenda with, this nationalized healthcare, with what we have been talking about? I mean, all of this stuff is related. What is the agenda behind something like this socialized Obamacare system?
Well, Obamacare, you have to really think about how they created this. Obamacare was created with the government employees, which are the Obama and his staff, and insurance companies. They all sat in a room, and they all said, okay, what type of plan can we put together that where we can make a lot of money, the government can bring in a lot of revenue, and we can give a small benefit to the people? And we'll have a monopoly over the health insurance industry. And they said, you know what we do? This is what we do. We say everyone can get health insurance. We will create a couple different plans, and everyone has to be involved in health insurance. And the way to do this, it's very easy. We'll put a penalty on it. So do you want to be penalized, or do you want health insurance? And this way, there's no competition. They can set the prices. They can raise the premiums. And what are you going to do about it? Nothing. The only thing you can do is not take it, but then you're penalized. A lot of people saying, you know what, I'd rather get penalized because that's much lower than paying the high premiums. So they made the deal. The insurance companies are going to do very, very well, making a lot of money from those people who had to take those plans. We see corporations were exempt at this point from issuing and being penalized for Obamacare. And what we're going to see in the future is a lot of corporations right now are going to be opting out of their health insurance, telling people, actually I have a relative that owns a factory who says Obamacare is one of the best things ever for his company because he used to pay health insurance for all his employees. He said it was so easy. All I had to say, I opt out, and everyone had to go out and get their own health insurance through Obamacare. And he says, I removed that giant expense was removed, and it was put back on the people. And this is what you're going to see with many of the companies, where they're going to start saying, okay, guess what? We're not going to be giving you health insurance. You're going to have to go to the Obamacare and get it from there. And all the companies, because this was all part of the deal, are going to make out. Their expenses are going to go lower. And all those premiums are going to shift over to the people. Now, these premiums, they're not affordable, even though it's the Affordable Care Act. They're continually rising every single day. And what we're seeing right now is people are saying, you know something? I can't pay for this anymore. It's too expensive. And we see Obamacare is, I think, 24 million people from where they're supposed to be. They never reached the goal where they were supposed to be because a lot of people are saying, I can't afford this. And a lot of people that have health insurance just stayed with their company health insurance. So Obamacare really didn't help people at this point. Now, the lower class, they might getting a little bit of help because they get subsidized, but everyone else, it's a complete disaster. Yeah. And this is not an incredible health insurance system where everyone's getting health insurance. It's the same system we had. You're just forced to take it. There's no difference. Actually, you're forced to take it with higher premiums. Now, people complained about the premiums. So what's happening is they're saying, guess what? We'll keep the premiums the way they are right now. We'll just raise the deductibles. $3,000 for a family, $5,000 for a family, $6,000 for a family. And what that means is you have to pay out of pocket before the insurance companies will throw in any of the benefits. So you're paying the premium, you're paying the deductible, and you're getting no benefit. Why do you think Congress exempted themselves from Obamacare? If Obamacare was so great, every single government person in this country should be getting it on their own.
Wow.
But they're not, because they don't want it. And this was to help bring in tax revenue, because the government needs revenue, the debt's going up, The people are being laid off. They don't have the same revenue coming in. That's why they have Obamacare. This is why they have FATCA. This is why they are trying a carbon tax, because they can't pay and sustain the debt in this country. And as time goes on, as more and more people lose their jobs and go to part-time jobs or fall off the job market, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And they're doing whatever they possibly can to bring in the revenue. And Obamacare was supposed to be a part of this, but it is a colossal fail for the country right now. And it's just bleeding the people left and right from all their funds. They don't have any other funds to go out shopping or things like that. They're just bogged down in worthless health insurance.
Yeah, no, you're right. They sure are. And actually, what you were saying about the business opting out, being able to opt out of Obamacare, that is actually news to me. And I know my friend of mine who is a general manager for a sports chalet not too far from where I live, he was telling me about the problems that they're dealing with on a real-time basis, where the part-time employees, they're getting screwed. You know, now they are working well below 30 hours, where as before, they used to be able to work 32 hours, 33 hours. Now they're not. Now they're working 20 hours, and, you know, they just have the managers who are the full-time employees, and that's it. You know, they've cut down on those expenses. But yeah, it is a disastrous situation, and it is so sad. I watched my own health insurance premiums go up. My son, when he was born 2 years ago, it went from being $5,000 between deductible and out of pocket, you know, the shared expense. Mm-hmm. It went from $5,000, which was what the estimate was in 2013. It jumped to $6,000 for 2014 when the Obamacare kind of kicked into gear. We weren't able to keep our health insurance. It wasn't affordable. It was more expensive, and it's just getting worse from there. But Dave, just your closing thoughts here before we say goodbye. I want to say thank you for coming on and having the discussion with me, and just your closing thoughts here.
Well, I think as we move forward throughout this year, I know the stock market looks fantastic, and they're keeping it up there. Precious metals actually has risen since December of 2015, about $200 or so, and that's holding steady right now. It looks like it's getting harder and harder to suppress gold. And I think as we move throughout this year, I think we're going to see things accelerate where the deterioration of the economy continues. It gets worse and worse. We might have little blips here and there where things might pop up as a dead cat bounce, but GDP, manufacturing, retail, everything else is just going to continually slide and decline. The debt is going to continually rise. We're going to see more war throughout the Middle East. I think we're going to see a huge amount of false flags, and I think eventually what's going to happen as this entire system falls apart, the U.S. government, central bank, they're going to have no alternative but to push the major false flag to push us into a great war, because really there's no way out of this situation right now unless they just throw up their hands and say, okay, sorry, we're responsible for all this, and the whole system just crashed, and we're going to try to make it better. Please don't blame us. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what they're going to do is create some type of false flag, either it be nuclear, cyber attack, or a combination of that, to really send the message that we need to go after Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, and the Islamic State. And we can see they're continually trying this in all different ways, and eventually they're just going to bring it home here to the United States. They're going to bring it home to UK, different countries in Europe, and most likely have this done simultaneously to really get the Western world involved in this next war. And it feels like we're heading down this path. It's just getting worse and worse as time goes on. Military assets are being moved all over the place. The U.S. is provoking countries like China in the Pacific. They're continually moving assets into the Middle East, provoking Russia. And I think as time goes on, it's just going to get worse. And when they have no way out of this, they're just going to resort to this major false flag, and the whole thing is going to start World War III.
Well, there you have it, everyone. That's Dave with the X22 report. You can also watch his interviews as well at the X22 report Spotlight.